My name is Camila Ortiz, and I still remember the sound of that knocking as if it were etched into the walls of my apartment. It wasn't polite or patient. It was desperate wild fists pounding against the wood at 2 in the morning. I froze with the remote in my hand, the glow of some meaningless crime show flickering across the room. For a second, I thought it was a neighbor, locked out after too many drinks. But the pounding came again, sharper, frantic, and a voice broke through the night air. "Camila, please open the door." I knew that voice. My chest tightened before my brain even caught up. It was my sister, Marissa. We hadn't seen each other in months. I pushed back the chair, crossed the room, and slid the deadbolt with trembling fingers. The door cracked open, and what I saw nearly dropped me to my knees. Marissa swayed on the threshold, hair plastered to her face, one eye swollen shut. In her arms, she clutched my niece, little Lila, whose wheelchair was jammed halfway through the doorway. Lila's hands were clamped so tight around the armrests that her knuckles had gone white. Before I could speak, Marissa collapsed against me with a broken groan. I hooked my arm under her, dragging her inside while tugging Lila's chair free from the frame. My heart pounded louder than the TV still buzzing behind me. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. A text lit the screen. "From Mom!" "Don't save her. She made her bed. Let her lie in it." The words blurred for a second, my pulse roaring in my ears. The woman who raised me, who once drilled into us that family always comes first, had just told me to leave my own sister bleeding on my floor. I didn't put the phone down gently. I slammed it face first onto the counter and turned back to Marissa. "You're safe here," I whispered, though I wasn't sure any of us were. Marissa's weight dragged heavy against me as I steered her toward the couch. Her breaths were shallow, broken, like each inhale scraped the inside of her chest. I grabbed the blanket draped over the backrest and wrapped it around her. Not to keep her warm, it was August, sticky and hot, but to keep her from shaking herself apart. Lila's wheelchair rattled as I guided it fully inside and nudged the door shut with my foot. She didn't say a word, just held that old silver necklace against her chest, the one our grandmother used to wear. Her little fingers clenched around it like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I crouched in front of her, searching her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, eyes wide, darting to her mother slumped on the couch. That silence from her, it wasn't the silence of calm. It was the silence of a child who'd already seen too much. I turned back to Marissa, pushing the damp hair off her face. Her lips were pale, flecked with blood. And when I pressed my hand against her side, she winced hard. I'd patched up enough bruised ribs back in the service to know when things weren't simple. She caught my wrist weakly. "Don't call Mom." I almost laughed, bitter and short. That's not a problem. I wanted to ask who had done this, what hell she'd crawled out of, but her head sagged forward before she could form words. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Whatever this was, it wasn't just one bad night. This had been building. I got to my feet, crossed into the kitchen, and yanked open the cabinet under the sink. Old habits die hard. I still kept a first aid kit stocked like I was expecting deployment orders. Scissors, antiseptic, gauze. My hands stayed steady even as my chest burned. When I cut away the loose threads of her torn shirt, the bruises leapt out in angry purples and blacks. A shallow cut traced across her hip, raw but not life-threatening. My gut twisted. Whoever had done this hadn't just wanted to scare her. They wanted to break her. I heard Lila whisper something, barely more than breath. She said we couldn't come here. I looked up, meeting her frightened eyes. "Who said that?" She swallowed hard, fingers digging into that necklace. "Grandma!" The room tilted for a second, like the air itself shifted colder. My mother had told them not to come here, and still Marissa had dragged herself across town in the middle of the night, half broken, just to reach my door. Marissa stirred, her voice a rasp scraping past swollen lips. "Please, don't send me back." I leaned closer, trying to keep my tone level. "Back where? Marissa, what happened?" Her eyes fluttered shut again, like answering might cost her the last ounce of strength she had left. I wanted to shake her awake, force the words out. But then Lila spoke, soft, hesitant, as if the shadows in the room might overhear. "Grandma was there," she said. The words landed like a stone dropped into my chest. I crouched so we were eye level. "Tonight you saw her tonight." Lila nodded, her hand trembling against the necklace. She told me not to say anything, not about Derek. The name slammed through me. Derek Hale, Marissa's husband. My fists curled tight before I forced them open again. "What did he do?" "Lila," I asked carefully. Her chin trembled. "He said he'd take me away. Said Mom couldn't stop him." I felt the heat rising in my throat. The same heat I used to carry on patrol when things went bad fast. Only this wasn't some stranger or hostile. This was family, tearing each other apart in the ugliest ways. I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumb hovering over the contacts. Mom's text still glared back at me, cold and merciless. I shoved it aside and punched in 3 numbers. "Porter County Emergency." The dispatcher's voice answered. "My sister just showed up at my apartment," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "She's badly hurt. Domestic violence. I need an ambulance and police." The dispatcher asked questions, details I answered automatically, but my eyes never left Marissa's broken frame on my couch. She stirred once, cracked open her good eye, and whispered, "You don't know the whole story. I'm starting to figure it out." I told her, but even as I said it, I knew the truth. The story was darker, deeper, and far closer to home than I ever wanted to admit. The ambulance's siren wasn't even turned on. Just the steady flash of lights cutting through the night as we followed it to the hospital. I pushed Lila's chair across the parking lot, my hand firm on her handle, her silence heavier than any words she could have said. Inside the ER, fluorescent light washed the color from everything. Nurses swarmed around Marissa, lifting her carefully onto a bed, checking vitals, calling out numbers that painted a grim picture. I stayed close, showing my military ID when someone questioned why I wouldn't leave her side. Lila sat next to me, her necklace clutched tight. Her voice was a whisper, almost lost in the beeping monitors. "Grandma said Mom deserved it." I turned sharply, my pulse hammering. Deserved what she said Derek was the only one keeping us together. That Mom should be grateful he hadn't left. The words came out of an 8-year-old's mouth, but I could hear Patricia's voice echoing behind them. My mother had stood there, watched this man tear Marissa apart, and instead of stepping in, she'd justified it. A doctor approached, speaking in that calm, clinical tone I'd heard too many times. 2 cracked ribs, possible fracture in her arm, significant bruising. "She'll need monitoring, but she's stable. Stable." It should have eased me. It didn't. When the officer assigned to the case asked if Marissa wanted to file a statement, she shook her head, weakly. "Not yet." The wall between us thickened. Fear, shame, loyalty, whatever was keeping her quiet. It was stronger than her pain. I watched her turn her face away, and the fury inside me hardened into something colder. If she couldn't fight yet, then I would. Because Derek wasn't just hurting her. Patricia was helping him. And together, they were bleeding Lila dry, stealing every dollar meant to make her life easier. I leaned back in the stiff plastic chair, pulling out my phone. My thumb hovered over the Notepad app. If they thought their lies and bruises could stay hidden, they hadn't met the part of me that never left the service. This time, I was going to build a case that wouldn't just hold up. It would burn. By the time dawn began bleeding pale light through the hospital blinds, I hadn't closed my eyes once. Every time a door opened, I half expected Derek to swagger in with that fake smile he always wore. Or worse, Patricia, with her careful mask of maternal concern. When I finally stepped out into the hallway to breathe, the air was sharp with antiseptic and burnt coffee. That's when I saw him. Derek, leaning against the far wall like he had every right to be there. A clean shirt stretched across his frame, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. "You shouldn't be here," I told him, my voice low, steady. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Relax," Camila, I'm just here to clear the air. We're all family, right? The way he said family twisted my stomach. She's in a hospital bed because of you, I said flatly. His smirk twitched. Marissa likes to spin stories when she doesn't get her way. You of all people should know she's dramatic. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tilted it so the small red recording dot glowed between us. Keep talking. Derek! For the first time, his smile cracked. He shifted his weight, straightened. You think you're smart, but you don't understand how this works. Patricia's on my side. She's got connections. Whatever story Marissa is feeding you, it won't hold. She doesn't have to say a word. I replied, my tone like ice. Her bruises already did. The mask dropped for a split second. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. And then he leaned close enough that only I could hear. You keep pushing. You'll regret it. Your career, your life, everything you've built, it can all fall apart. I didn't flinch. Then you'd better hope I do fall apart. Derek, because if I don't, you're finished. He took a step back, muttering something under his breath before slipping down the hallway. I saved the recording immediately. It wasn't enough to nail him, not yet. But it was one more brick in the wall I was building, and I intended to make that wall unbreakable. I wasn't naive enough to think Derek's threats were empty. Men like him never came alone. They carried enablers, excuses, and sometimes the law twisted in their favor. That's why, before leaving the hospital, I called Clara Whitmore. She wasn't just any lawyer. She'd built her career dragging abusers into the light and pinning them down with facts they couldn't wriggle away from. When Clara walked into Marissa's room later that morning, her crisp navy suit was a shield all on its own. She introduced herself softly to Marissa, crouched down so she could meet Lila eye to eye, then looked at me. We'll need to move quickly. A protective order first, custody next. Marissa shrank back against the pillow, her voice brittle. I can't fight him. He'll take Lila. He'll ruin me. I caught her hand. He's already ruining you. This is how we stop it. Clara slid a stack of forms onto the tray table. We'll request an emergency order today. Judges don't ignore medical reports and photographs, especially not when there's a child involved. By noon, we were sitting in a cramped courtroom, the air buzzing with whispers from other families waiting their turn. Derek arrived with an attorney who looked more like a salesman than a defender. Patricia sat right behind him, pearls around her neck, her lips tight in disapproval every time her eyes flicked toward us. Derek's lawyer started the performance, painting Marissa as unstable, choosing to abandon her home in the middle of the night, claiming she'd endangered her daughter by dragging her across town. I clenched my fists under the table, every word digging deeper. Then Clara rose, calm as a surgeon. She laid out photographs of Marissa's injuries, medical charts signed just hours before, and sworn statements from the ER staff. She spoke evenly, but every sentence landed like a hammer. When the judge finally leaned forward, his voice cut through the noise. Until further review, temporary custody is granted to Mrs. Hale. Mr. Hale, you are barred from contact outside of court-approved visitation. The protective order stands. Marissa exhaled a shaky breath I hadn't realized she'd been holding. Patricia whispered something into Derek's ear. But for once, he didn't look so sure of himself. The victory in that first hearing barely lasted 24 hours. By the next morning, Patricia had found her angle. I was summoned into my supervisor's office at the port, a thick folder already waiting on the desk. My boss's face was stiff, his tone clipped. We received a formal complaint. Camila says you've been abusing your background in law enforcement to access financial records you're not entitled to. My stomach tightened. From who he didn't answer. But I didn't need him to. I already knew. Patricia. I set the folder aside and looked him dead in the eye. Every document I've touched has been with Marissa's written consent. Power of attorney, copies signed. You can review them yourself. His expression softened a fraction, but the warning stayed. I believe you. But if this escalates, You'd better have everything airtight. That night, I stayed at the kitchen table until my eyes blurred, labeling every file, every screenshot, every timestamp. If Patricia wanted to drag me down with Derek, I'd make sure my armor was bulletproof. But Patricia wasn't finished. 2 days later, Clara called with news. We have a neighbor willing to testify, an older woman named Mrs. Allen. She says she's watched Patricia cash disability checks and hand Derek envelopes of cash more times than she can count. It was the crack we needed. Still, Patricia tried to play her part. She showed up at the next hearing in pastel pink, her voice dripping with false concern. My daughter has always been dramatic. She's twisting family disagreements into something they're not. I stared at her, wondering how she could look a judge in the eye and lie so smoothly. Then Mrs. Allen stepped forward, her voice firm, unshaken. I saw Patricia give him that money. I asked her why. She said, and I quote, "It's better in my hands than in Marissa's." Patricia's face barely moved, but her hands twitched where they rested on her lap. Derek shifted uncomfortably, the courtroom air turning brittle with tension. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, panic. The wall he'd built with my mother's help was cracking, and I was ready to drive the wedge deeper. Rain streaked the courthouse windows the morning of the final hearing, the kind of steady drizzle that soaked through your coat and made the whole city feel heavier. Marissa walked between me and Clara, clutching a binder of her medical reports and statements. Lila stayed home with Mrs. Allen, coloring at the kitchen table instead of sitting through another day of adults dissecting her life. Inside the courtroom, Derek sat stiff at the defense table, a suit hanging loose on his frame. Patricia was beside him, dressed like a church matron, pearls glinting under the harsh lights. She didn't look at us when we entered. Derek's attorney opened with the same tired refrain. Marissa was unstable, incapable, vindictive. His words bounced hollow against the stack of evidence Clara laid before the judge: photographs, medical charts, annotated bank records, and the audio recording of Derek's threats in the hospital hallway. Then Clara brought in the kill shot. Mrs. Allen testified again, firmer this time, linking dates on the bank records to the very evenings she'd watched Patricia hand Derek envelopes of cash. When Derek tried to deflect, he slipped. I didn't handle the money, Patricia did, he blurted. Clara pounced. So your sworn statement last month, claiming you managed all household finances, was false. The courtroom went still. The judge's pen scratched across his notes. Patricia's composure cracked for a breath, her lips tightening into a thin line. When Marissa took the stand, her voice didn't shake. She spoke of the night Derek shoved her into the counter, of Patricia telling her to stop making a scene, of dragging Lila's chair through the doorway while her mother blocked her path. She ended with 7 words that silenced even Derek. I didn't abandon my home. I escaped it. The judge leaned back, folding his hands. Effective immediately. Full custody of Lila Hale is granted to her mother. Mr. Hale's visitation rights are revoked. Mrs. Carter's contact is limited to supervised visits only. The gavel struck wood, sharp, final, and just like that, the storm they'd built around Marissa broke apart. When we stepped out of the courthouse, the rain had slowed to a mist, soft enough to blur the streetlights into hazy halos. Marissa gripped my hand like she was afraid the ruling might vanish if she let go. For the first time in months, she didn't look over her shoulder. Back at the small townhouse she'd rented, Lila wheeled herself to the door before we even knocked. Did we win? She asked, her voice tentative but full of hope. Marissa knelt, gathering her close. Yes, baby, we won. I stood in the doorway, watching the two of them, the smell of cookies from Mrs. Allen's kitchen drifting through the hall. Patricia and Derek had built their fortress on fear, but it hadn't survived the truth. That night, Lila hung her grandmother's old necklace on a peg above her bed. So I don't lose it, she explained. To her, it wasn't about holding on to the past anymore. It was about choosing what to keep and what to let go. As I drove home through slick streets reflecting ribbons of light, I realized something simple. Justice wasn't about punishing them. It was about safety, about giving Marissa and Lila the freedom to breathe without fear. Family isn't blood. Family is who keeps you safe.